Okay, so picking up where we left off, the only thing I did in between videos is I dragged and dropped this ring model from an external folder into the asset area. You already saw me do that with the evergreen, so figured you didn't need me to do that again. You could already see how to do that. So let's build on what we did in the last video. In the HeroCon script, we created this variable, and it lets your character rotate to the left. The problem is I really wasn't forward thinking when I named this because it doesn't scale well. It just says rotate hero. Well, to be more precisely, we're rotating the hero left, and now we're going to rotate the hero right. So it's okay. You can change variable names pretty easy. Just change it here, and then just make sure you changed where you used it, which is here. So now it's rotate hero left. Save it. And as far as the system is concerned, you didn't modify this, you actually created a whole new variable. So when you go to your hero character, see how it updated and now it says done? So just make sure you come back in here and select A again. Okay, so now that we overcame that little bit of short-sightedness of me, we can now come up here. Rotate hero R. And now we're just going to copy and paste this. Why? Because we're really not reinventing the wheel. We're just repurposing this. So we copy and we paste it here. Again, why here? Because what you were saying is if this is true, then do this. Well, if it's not true, then do something else. Well, that something else can be yet another if statement. So in this case, we're going to look at rotate hero right. It's going to be positive 45, so the opposite. And we put in another else. The reason why you need another else is because you added another if. So this if is being executed if this else is utilized. So in other words, if this is true, then it stops. If it's not true, it goes to else. And then within that else is this if and its else. Okay, so I think that should about do it. So we now have a left rotate, a right rotate. The rotation is the opposite, but this just rotates the character. We need to rotate the world as well. So we'll save that and then select a letter for rotate right. So here's our hero character. Here's the new variable for the script. Again, we're using WASD, so we'll choose D. And now we'll go to the Orb Con, and we have to do the same thing. So here, we did Z rotate and we did Control Z. So what we want to do is we really want to indicate that we are rotating left or right, not just left. So we'll again modify this. We'll do Control Z L, Control Z L. I mean, technically you could leave the old variable names, but honestly, it's important, particularly when programs get bigger, that the variable is self-documenting. And that is, by looking at the name of the variable, you know what it does. And by doing this, you're keeping a naming convention. All right, so we modified that to match the new variable. We'll have to go to the inspector to select the letter again. And we're going to do the same kind of thing where instead of setting to 0, we now look for that new check. So if R is selected, it's going to be a positive 0.5. Again, you're just reversing it. And let's see, I believe that's it. So now we just have to go to the inspector to choose the letters. So let's go to sphere. Yep, none and none. So A and D. So I believe that should do it. So we'll wait for the tree so it's easier to see. And there we go. The character did indeed rotate right. He turned right, turned left. We didn't break that. So actually, we're in pretty good shape now. So one more thing that I want to do, again, as cleanup, is that this character doesn't quite look right. It should be more of a top-down view. So I believe last time we accidentally rotated him on in the x-axis, and I think it looked better. So he currently has like a -9. Let's make it like a -20. So it'll have more of a top-down view and see how that looks. Let's do it one more time. -30. Okay, the reason why it's not working is because with the hero control, we're overriding it here with a 0. So it really doesn't matter because that gets overridden. So it'd be easy enough for me to go back and edit out that mistake, but I think that's a good teachable moment that it's like, hey, I'm changing the rotation. Why isn't it working? Because it's getting overridden here. It's important to realize that these are the same thing, that you're changing this component, but you're changing it here. So let's set this to be -30 is probably too much. Let's try -20. And -20 and -20. There we go. See now how he looks different? So teachable moment where I made a mistake and it was actually just the good thing that I made the mistake. And again, I don't want to get too much into that because that's just placeholder. We're eventually going to put a character who can run and jump and that kind of thing. Okay, so now he can rotate left. Now he can rotate right. And now we're going to put in some rings. Now, for those of you who are more advanced and you know what instantiate is, you're going to look at what I'm doing and you're going to say, gee, Mike, it'd be a lot easier to just instantiate these objects, like the trees you manually put in place. It'd be easier to just instantiate them all. And long term, that is what you're going to want to do. But for now, this is meant to be more introductory. So let's take that ring, and if you notice, I've already shrunk it down in size here. Drag and drop it into the environment. Again, we said the position was, I believe, was it 0 and 10 for the top? And if you zoom in, you can see the ring is really the wrong direction. You want it to be vertical. So you want to rotate it on the x-axis, -90. And just as I mentioned instantiation, eventually what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a prefab. So after we attach everything that we need to it, then we put it into, what you do is you drag and drop it into the asset area. That turns it into a prefab. And that way, every time you instantiate it using the instantiate command, it keeps everything on it. So whereas this is just the model and nothing else, this is an object that has all the attributes of the model and any components. But don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I just want to show you the basics. So here's the ring. Add component, physics, and it's going to be, let's just do a box collider. There's different types of colliders. I'm not too worried about getting it exactly right because this is just a fairly simple game. What I did is I clicked on Edit Collider, and there's like these dots on each side. You can tweak the collision area for the object. You don't have to do box collider. You could do other things such as if you do physics, there is a sphere collider, there's a capsule collider, there's a wheel collider. So there's different types of colliders you could use. Using a box collider gives you a little bit extra benefit because even though this is round, it's surrounded, if you can see the green lines, by a box. So you don't have to be as precise to detect a collision. Is this a trigger? Yes. We don't want it to be solid. We don't want the character knocking it over like a football. We want them to be able to pick it up so it disappears. Okay, so what happens? First, let's just run this. So let's take the ring, put it onto the sphere. That way it'll rotate with the sphere, and let's run it. There it is. Still kind of big, actually. So let's take that. Let's go to the model and make this like 2.5. There we go. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to have this disappear when a collision occurs. So right-click, create, C#, and let's call this ring con, short for ring control. Click on the ring, put on ring con, and we'll open up that script. So we want it to detect a collision. So outside of start, outside of update, we're going to create a new routine. It's going to be void on trigger enter collider, and it's going to collide with other. Okay, so first of all, I said that the object is a trigger because I put a check where it says is trigger. So we're looking for a collision with that trigger box. And this is simply saying this is going to represent whatever is colliding with it. So, if other dot name equals, and right now the parent is the head, so it's called head. So you could just rename that hero or whatever, but for now, that's the name of the object. We need a double equal sign there. So if the other name of the other object is head, then destroy game object. Pretty self-explanatory. This says destroy the game object that the script is attached to. The script is attached to the ring. So when a collision with this object, with that name occurs, then go ahead and destroy the object that the script is attached to, which is the ring. Now let's check our character. I don't think he has a collider yet. Actually, he does. He has a sphere collider, so I believe this should work. So we're not going to move because it's directly in front of him. We'll just, or should I say we're not going to rotate. There, and it worked. So just like that, you now have the ability to pick up rings. And it's just a matter of adding a variable that every time a ring is increased, that variable goes up one. Maybe there's also a score component, so you have a separate variable that increases with score. So I think that's actually a good place to stop for this one. So again, it's not much to look at, but like I said, it's all about the functionality. So now you have a 3D orb environment that rotates on its own. You can rotate left, you can rotate right. You can now pick up rings, and that same functionality for picking up the ring can be used for picking up any object. Okay, how do you pick up a power-up? Same thing. You put a collider box on it, you set it to trigger, and you use that same code. And then it's just a matter of, okay, once the object has been picked up, what happens? So I'll tell you what, we'll go just a little bit further. We will have there be a game master object that tracks variables. So game object, create empty, click on it, call it GM. Calling it GM or game master doesn't make a difference. It's just so you, the designer, realize that that's what you're going to use it for. Right click, create, C#, and we'll call this game flow. And what you use this script for is for functionality that really isn't associated necessarily with any one object or is associated with multiple objects. So click on GM, put on the script, and among other things, you'll create what's known as static variables. These are variables that are accessible anywhere. So if you noticed with the hero, we had to create a key code here and a key code here. They don't recognize each other's variable, so you had to create two separate variables. When you create a static variable, that static variable is accessible everywhere. So, public static, and that's all it takes to make it a static variable. So public static, and we'll make it an int, and we'll call this ring count, and it starts off as 0. Because it's a static variable, it will be accessible, as I said, everywhere. So if I look for ring count here, it will be recognized. So we just have to say game flow, because that's where the variable is declared, ring count, sure enough, there it is, plus equals 1. So what you're saying is this variable declared in this script is going to be increased 1 from its current value. So in other words, take the current value, increase it by 1. We'll save that, and we'll do one more thing. Debug. Sorry, I hadn't used it in a while. Debug.log, and we want a message, or well, we want a variable. Gameflow.ringCount. We want that to be displayed. So again, this script is attached to the ring. If it collides with an object called head, ring count is increased by 1. Ring count will be displayed in the debug log, and then the ring is destroyed. This is the debug log down here. And there we go. So just like that, you are now tracking rings. Like I said, you could have yet another variable that also tracks score. I'm not going to go into that far in this video. This is still the basic functionality. We want to be able to look at, say, collision with obstacles like the trees and things like that. We want to be able to add the ability to jump more than likely. So that should wrap it up for this video, and that should do it.